Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of From No Crypto to No Crypto. I'm your host, the Crypto Coach, Blockchain Wayne. Today we're joined by Kaitlin. Kaitlin is the CEO and founder of CryptoMondays London. Kaitlin, thanks for joining
Thanks,
us.
Wayne. I'm so excited to be here chatting with you.
Yeah, definitely. I picked the one role that I know you're consistent with, but you do so much in the space, so definitely want to get into that. But before we jump into what you're doing now, tell us a little bit about your background. I like to start like what got you into this industry, this crazy crypto space.
So, I am actually a former theater director, which one of the things I love about this industry is that you never really know where people come from because at least when we got started, I mean, I don't know I was 2017, you couldn't get a degree in
Yeah.
Web3. There was nothing like that.
Yeah.
So, everybody kind of comes from a different background, which I really love. So yes, I'm one of a few. I know there's a few of us theater kids rolling around in the Web3 world, but yeah. So I used to direct theater in London for a really long time, and a really good friend of mine from uni got in touch with me in 2017 and said, "I want to start a company based around sovereign identity. I just want to sit in the back and code. I don't want to do anything front facing. You do theater. Will you come and be the front facing person?" And I just remember thinking, absolutely not. You have the wrong person. I don't know anything about technology. I've never heard of Bitcoin. I don't know what you're on about. And he said, listen, I'm going to give you a week. Go away, do some research, come back, tell me what you think. And so I did. And so I did the whole thing, the YouTube deep dive rabbit
Mhm.
hole. And I came out of it just with my eyes wide open. And I thought, this is such an incredible, there's so much potential here with this technology. I'm in. And so I quit theater and I came to the dark side, as I say. So
Nice. Yeah, yeah. I kind of got in. It was around the same time. It was towards the end of 2016. But yeah, that people don't understand that rabbit hole. And I don't know, how was it for you? Because even before I had a grasp on Bitcoin, I realized that I don't really understand how money works. How does our financial system actually
so
operate? And when I went down that rabbit hole, that was the holy crap moment where I was like, I don't understand Bitcoin yet, but we're in
yeah.
trouble.
I completely agree. I don't think that financial literacy is prioritized, particularly in the US, because I know we are
Mhm.
both American. So I remember
Yeah.
learning about exactly that, sort of the economy and trying to make sense of all of the jargon and the lingo. And I remember thinking, I've had no education whatsoever in this realm, and now all of a sudden I'm trying to teach
Yeah.
myself. So all of my knowledge about finance, the economy, all of that comes through the lens of crypto and Web3. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but yeah, that was my
Yeah.
first
For
foray
sure.
kind of into that field as well. I had no idea.
Yeah, and I think, I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist per se, but I do think that that's by design.
Oh,
I forgot who was it that said it. It was whether it was an old president years ago, but basically the quote goes something like, if the world understood how the financial systems operate, there'd be a revolution tomorrow. Like if everyone understood it, was kind of the premise.
I like that. And I think
And
a lot, like
it's
you said, a lot of it is intentional because then we have to pay for services, for something because we don't comprehend it. So I think you're right. I have over the years
yeah,
endeavored to learn and teach myself, but there's still loads that I don't understand, frankly. So
yeah. Yeah, and you made a good point as well, right? I mean, coming in around that time, there was no formal education around it. Like the only degree you got was a degree of hard knocks, I guess you could say, from trial and error, trying to understand it, trying to and then trying to explain it to people. You get better as
you
you
do.
go, because at first you sound like a
It's
crazy
much better
person.
now, but back then everyone was like, "What are you on about?" But the other thing is, I'm sure you remember this as well. But there was a huge ICO boom, sort of
Yeah,
2017, 2018, and that was when I really started to learn. What are we doing here? There's no
yeah,
regulations in place at that time at all. It was really the Wild
yeah.
West. I know people use that phrase a lot, but it really was crazy.
Oh yeah. I was calculating at one point a few years later, and I was like, if I just had the Ethereum that I spent on ICOs back, I would be probably sitting on the beach right now recording with you. I enjoy podcasting. I'll do it no matter what, but I'd definitely be in a better location than most people don't know. I got a green screen behind me, so it's I can make the background. Maybe I'll make this one a beach for this episode. Yeah, yeah. Maybe I'll do that for this episode as I when I do the editing. But yeah, so it was definitely a different time. Education. That's kind of what drew me into this space too, is because I realized there's a big gap just people understanding why is this important. And so,
For sure. And
um,
I very
jump.
much admire all of the education work that you do as well, because I think we're quite aligned in the fact that I sort of always repeat
Absolutely.
this phrase, but one of the biggest obstacles to mass adoption is lack of education. And I think beyond mass adoption, which is this kind of concept that we talk about all the time in the space, I think the reality is that you do require a certain level of understanding, especially when you're dealing with tokens
Mhm.
and money and the volatility of the market and the risks that are inherent to what we're doing. I think that education is so paramount. And then of course, when you broaden the view outside of crypto trading, that's a huge part of Web3, of course, but then you start looking at the technology, and then I do think it's really helpful to understand a little bit about what differentiates something as decentralized versus the pre-existing systems that just don't work anymore.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, most people are ignorant of the systems until they have a problem with it, right? If somebody walks into a bank and says, "Hey, I want to withdraw my money," and they're like, "Why? What's it for?" And they give you that friction point, then you're like,
Yep.
"Okay, that's a problem." I was at a Bitcoin meetup last night, and one of the guys was an older guy, right? He's probably in his 70s, but he's into Bitcoin. He's buying. He's trying to buy on Kraken, and has all the email confirmations from recently when it said, "Thank you for your purchase." But then he goes in his account and the funds aren't there. He sees that the transaction never actually went through because his bank, which is Regions Bank in the South, uh, blocked his transactions. And then he said, okay, so I'll try. And he was trying to do like bank transfer, right? So then he tried a debit card, and they canceled his debit card saying they suspected fraud and sent him a new one.
It
Yeah,
just goes
yeah,
to show how bad it still is. I mean, I know in the
yeah,
UK,
yeah.
so just for context, I am located primarily in the UK, and you hear all these stories of these crypto companies being debanked essentially because once their bank found out what they're doing with the business, what their project is all about, they were like, never mind, you know. Huge issue over here, massively.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I thought. Like people that have been in spaces are in countries where they have that friction. Like if you've lived in Venezuela or Zimbabwe or Cyprus or even in India, right? I mean, they realized that the problem when a whole I forgot which note it was, but one of their currency notes was immediately put to rest,
Yeah.
and they were kind of shut out from the banks, and so there's a lot of value that was just lost overnight because they couldn't change those into other currencies. So it's a problem. We don't realize we take it for granted. We think, oh, why do I need that? I've got PayPal. I got Cash App. I can just send money instantly all over the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, exactly. Mm.
All right. So take us through now. All right. So 2017, your eyes were open. You know what we say. People say red pill, orange pill, right? Your eyes are open to what this technology could be. So from 2017 to now, tell me a little bit more about what you've done because you've done quite a bit
Yeah,
in this
yeah. So
space.
I, so speaking of ICOs, actually, I joined this decentralized ID. They were called DID, and now dissolved. By the way, they did not make it past the ICO boom. But at that time,
They were too early,
huh?
right? I said they were probably too early,
I
right?
think the concept was amazing, and it's part of the reason that I'm so passionate about privacy and security and things like that. Like I know decentralized identity foundation still exists, and you have a couple other like DID companies that have cropped up, and I'm always supportive. I think it's such an important thing. So I do think the concept was there, but the
Yeah,
execution was lacking. And I think also like so kind of as the story goes, I was sent to New York to pitch decentralized ID on Wall Street, and I remember being in the room, all men, and I'm standing at the front getting ready to do this pitch, and I was like, "Who in here owns Bitcoin? No hands. Okay. Who in here knows what the
right,
blockchain is? No hands." And I remember thinking, I am not in the right place right now. Like this is a mistake, you know?
right.
Little,
Yeah,
needless to say, there was very little raised on that particular trip. But the positive of it was, while I was there, I started looking up meetups and events and communities because I was thinking I really want to embed myself in this industry because I don't know very much at this point. I'm the fake it till you make it mantra fully applies. I'm literally
yeah,
talking bullshit a lot of times. And I remember trying to read the Bitcoin white paper, which I have subsequently read, but I'm so new. It might as well have been written in Mandarin. So I understood very little, but I knew it was important. Bitcoin being the
yeah,
sort of granddaddy of it all. So Yeah, so while I'm in New York, I discovered this meetup called Crypto Mondays, New York. And so I go and I meet Lou Kerner and James Haft, who were the co-founders of the original iteration of Crypto Mondays in New York. And they were very casually like, why don't you start one in London? And so I dismissively agreed. And then, like, little did I know. So yeah, I started it when I came back to London. And yeah, it was me and a couple of guys sitting around just talking, just talking. But I had it every month, and that consistency was everything. And so by having it every single month,
Absolutely.
I then brought in a co-founder, I brought in a team, we started to grow, we started to get sponsors, we started to realize we can get some traction here. People are curious, people want to learn, and there's, at least at that time, there wasn't anywhere for them to go. So that's what this meetup really supplied, was a meeting of the minds, if you will. So we didn't even have content in the beginning. But I realized pretty quickly that people
Yeah.
need more value. Like, the networking part is fine, right? Like, if you think about what's your favorite part of conferences, usually it's the networking. So the idea initially was like,
Absolutely.
let's take that best part of the conferences and just do that. And that worked for a little while. But as I say, I realized that people
Yeah.
wanted more value. They wanted to learn. So then I started to put together content. And at that time, I was just picking topics that I wanted to learn about because I didn't know. I was still very, very new. So I was quite lucky in that I could be like, okay, NFTs, especially at that time. NFTs, big, huge thing. 2019, everyone's talking, it's like a huge hype. Okay, so that's actually when I brought in Jody Rich from NFT NYC, because he's the producer of that. He
Okay.
was in London and he came and did a talk. And so then people really got interested, because it was like, okay, you're managing to bring in these sort of subject matter experts. I can come in and learn something, and I can network, and I get free beer. So that was kind of like the winning, the
Mhm.
winning combination. And then it's just grown massively since then. And I actually have to say that COVID, rather than being a negative, actually benefited us greatly, because then we were no longer restricted by geographical location. So we just kept live streaming
Mhm.
these talks. And so we grew and grew and grew. I mean, we had hundreds of people on these calls. And obviously it's COVID. So very often
Yeah.
people are in lockdown and they're bored, and they want to learn something. So that actually helped us massively, like, just get the name out there. And then when things reopened in London, this was maybe 2022, early 2022, we started hosting live in person. And that very first event back in person, I mean, we had over 100 people, which we'd never been hitting those
Oh,
numbers
wow.
previously before COVID. So it actually helped us a lot.
Yeah.
And then we've been hitting those numbers pretty much ever since. And it's just grown. I think we have 14,000 members now. And that's all completely grassroots, like organic. We've never paid for followers, nothing
Right.
like that. So yeah, so now we are the longest running and the largest crypto meetup in the city, which I'm very proud of. We have a team of 14 people, all volunteers. And it's just quite incredible. And then in addition to that, I've done a bunch of other stuff in the background. So pulling off of my theater experience, I thought, if you can direct a theater show, you can do events. And Web3 events were a whole different beast than how I perceived Web2 events, with like very stuffy, loads of men in ties, like very, very boring corporate. And here you have Web3 with like, especially back then, you've got like Dead Mouse performing. And,
Yeah.
this is during the bull run. It was wild. So I really thought, oh, I could do this. It's like doing a theater show. So then I started doing events, and for Layer One, it was Layer One at that time. Kudos. I've since worked for NIM Technology, for Outlier Ventures, all the while running Crypto Mondays. And so it's sort of resulted in this really vast network that has benefited me greatly, I have to say, in my career. So now it's like I'm kind of a broker, if you will. So I can match make people and help host events, and I do a lot of marketing advisory to help sort of supplement my income, because Crypto Mondays is definitely not particularly lucrative, at least not yet. It's very much
Right.
a labor of love, I would say. So yeah, sort of the
Yeah.
story.
Because gotcha. Yeah. So you're yeah, because attendees at Crypto Mondays, right? They're not paying for any kind of admission. It's free for
So you
anybody to come.
can, I always sort of
And
say,
so,
like, it is truly decentralized. So every city is different. For example, I think Lisbon does charge like a very minimal amount for tickets when they have events. For London, it was really important to me. I felt like accessibility was everything, because had I not been able to
absolutely.
attend that free event at Crypto Mondays in New York, had I not been able to access free information on the internet, I probably would not be in this position. So accessibility and sort of lowering the barriers to entry was something that was really, really important to me. I didn't want a redo of the elitism that can exist in the financial world of Web 2. I wanted something where literally
Yeah.
anybody can learn and can engage in this industry. So with Crypto Mondays, it was like, I will never charge, like an admission fee. It will always be free. for
Right.
anyone who wants to come.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, there's a cost for the venue, but also you mentioned sponsors, right? So sponsors is probably where almost all the revenue,
Exactly.
all the
Exactly
income, I mean,
right. So
comes from,
we
right?
heavily rely on our business model of sponsorship tiers. I'm very, very grateful to all of them because they are supporting a nonprofit. So at the moment, we're working with
Yeah.
sort of the heavy hitters in the space. You know, we're working with ICP, we're working with Stewie. We also work with Fault 12, OVH Cloud, which is like infra, Kudos as well. I mean, I've been with Kudos since 2021. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
love there.
So tell me about that real quick, because some of the people listening may know about Kudos, and I haven't been following. So is Kudos rebranded, or it's just was a merger of the tech? Like, what
So
happened
they
with
didn't
that recently?
rebrand necessarily. So Kudos has been around since 2018. So they're kind of like considered OGs in
Yeah.
the space. And they were initially, well, they do have still a layer one blockchain that they created. That was back in 21,
Hmm.
22. But then they did sort of pivot to infrastructure. I mean, they always supplied infrastructure. There was always a distributed cloud sort of underpinning everything. The idea being that they could be an alternative to AWS. Obviously, that's changed now. AWS does have a decentralized version, but it used to be, you know, a sort
Hmm.
of singular pain point, which is quite dangerous when it comes to
Yeah.
security. So the idea was that Kudos was providing an alternative option. And then they've pivoted even more. And I say pivoted like in a good way because you listen to the market and you see what's needed and what the gaps are, and then you react accordingly. And so I think they've been very clever with that. So now Kudos has joined forces with ASI, which is the artificial or the AI super team really, which is Singularity
Hmm.
Network, Ocean Protocol, Fetch AI, and then Kudos joined as the fourth party that provides the infrastructure. So now they're really focused on AI infra, which is super important at the moment because you've got all these LLMs, like everything's being built and you need that. So I think Kudos, as I say, have been very smart about reacting to the market. Yeah, so I love those guys. Obviously, I've been with them a long time.
Yeah, I was just curious because a lot of people were saying it was like a token merger,
Oh
right?
yes,
And was
yes,
it?
they
It
did.
wasn't
Yeah, of
that.
course. So they did have a token.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
they had the Kudos token, which is now I don't know exactly the tokenomics of all of it, to be honest with you.
right.
But yeah. So now it's going to be like an ASI token, basically.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'd heard about it loosely and kind of followed a little bit, but wasn't sure about that. So a lot of experience in events. You've held a lot of events, put on a lot of events. I think it's important for those that are listening to understand. I think the most important thing you said earlier was consistency, right? You did it when there was just a few people, right? And it just continued to grow because you had it there. And I think some people get frustrated, like only had two people show up, only had three people show up, but it's not going to happen overnight, right? True organic community building is going to take time.
Absolutely. You're so right. It's not going to happen overnight. And I do see people getting frustrated and kind of giving up. And it makes me sad because it takes time to gain
Right.
traction for these things, you know, especially now because I don't think we've reached like saturation yet. It's still quite niche. And we are all, I say this, you know, early adopters still. I know we don't feel that way, especially you've been 2016. Like I know some people 2013,
Yeah.
2014. It doesn't feel that way, but the reality
Right.
is you are because the vast majority of people do not
Yeah.
engage with this type of technology yet. Or if they are engaging with it, it's abstracted to the point that they don't realize it. So I think, yeah, I just think that consistency is one of the least exciting, sexy answers you can give when it comes to building
Yeah.
community. But it's this idea that people know that no matter what happens, they can go once a month to this place, that it will happen regardless of what's going on in
Mm.
the world. And I think there's some sort of security, stability in that, and people respond to it. And once you start going, you start making bonds, making friends. I just think as we become more and more digital in our lives, and I think between social media and the algorithms and AI, that's happening quite rapidly. This kind of IRL connection is
Mm.
so important. And I know as someone who obviously Wayne and I bump into each other all over the world at various events,
Right.
someone who
Right.
travels so much like you do, those you know in person connections are really important.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really just accelerates everything. Then, like if I would compare, just kind of say like a business deal with someone I'm doing that I've met multiple times in person at these conferences versus the progression of just online calls and right the in person real life events are important. And it sounds like what you've done at Crypto Mondays London is you've taken the best elements of a conference. Because I think about that, like they have talks, people can go in and listen and learn certain things from speakers, but nobody wants to sit in a room listening to talks
All
all
day.
day,
Yeah.
right? You've got the network, and that's kind of how I do at conferences. Like most of 95% of the time, I'm in the halls networking with people. But then, a little bit of time, there are certain talks like I want to go hear this person because I
100%.
know what they're going to say is
Oh,
important.
I'm so
And you
curious.
took kind of that same
Oh,
event.
sorry, Wayne. But I'm so curious
Yeah,
your thoughts on this because so much of
yeah,
Web3 conferences now is the side events. And I wonder how you feel about that because I do think we've sort of lost the education side of things. Like I'm the same. Like my percentages are probably a little different. Maybe 60% is networking, but I'm not a BD to be fair. But then 40
yeah,
but then
right.
40% is I want to go and learn new things and I want to hear from these thought leaders in the space and I want to hear what they're saying. And I feel like so much of that is lost. You go to these big conferences and you've got these incredible people on stage and you've got 18 people in the audience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely impacting, and I think we hit a point. And I wasn't able to make ECC this year, but I know last year in Belgium it was. You were
Right.
there too, right? Yeah,
I
I remember
missed
we
ETC this year
kind of met up
too.
there.
Like I did the same as you. Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah. But I remember walking in the conference, and it was very bare, minimal booths, not a lot of people, but there were hundreds of side events going on, and so went to the side events. That kind of took precedent. And I think there's a balance because most people like those conferences eventually are going to lessen or are completely shut down if they don't have the attendance they need. And so I think side event organizers need to work with main event organizers in more of a collaborative way. And some do, but to have all these side events going on at the same time as the conference, when before the side events were either, you know, early morning before the main conference got started or after, or, if it was during the day, it was either the day before or the day
Hmm.
after, a conference happened. And now there's so much competition to where I don't have to go to this conference. I can go to 20 different events. And that's great if that's in your sector. But you're right, it is detracting from, and it's making it harder to connect with people that you may normally see if you're all at a conference center at one time. But the specialized events are good. I think there just needs to be a little bit more collaboration. And like, so say if I'm going to an NFT conference, right? And that's just because the last one I went to was NFT ONC. And there's an AI side event that's completely unrelated to NFTs, then okay, that could be at the same time because that's going to be a different audience than what you're looking for. But outside of that, if there's too much overlap, it's become where the side events are competing with the main conference and it becomes a detractor instead of an
But I think
enhancer.
if you look at the root of that, I think part of the problem is that
Yeah,
conferences, and rightly so, they have overheads. I understand that, but the cost of sponsoring, of getting platformed,
yeah,
of being able to speak, has become so expensive. It is cost prohibitive, and so in
yeah,
order to leverage the fact that you've got all these people in one seat, you've got people coming in and doing side events because that's what they can afford because it's significantly cheaper for them to host and platform themselves
absolutely.
and get a little restaurant and get something going on. And I think that's kind of how it started. But then equally, because you've got everybody going to the side events and less people paying to attend the conferences, they're then raising prices on everything to keep the conference going. So it's like this vicious cycle. And I'm not sure what the solution is
True.
because then you've got companies like I know
Yeah,
Token has started buying out all of the nearby venues. I know particularly like in Marina Bay Sands, this was a thing in Singapore. Like you had to then go
yeah,
through Token if you wanted to book a venue for a side event. Now, look, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that either because we're kind of back to square one with centralization there, aren't we? But
well,
but at the
yeah,
same time, like I can understand to some extent why they're doing that because they're getting almost crowded out by their own side events.
yeah. I mean, I did that. I in Singapore last year, I spoke at it was a pretty big side event. But obviously, I'm planning everything and looking at where I got to go, what time I should have to leave the main conference center, and that's when I realized it was one floor below in the same conference center, right? So it was very convenient, and that I mean that type of thing is really good. And that's kind of where I said more of a collaboration, not necessarily saying that. And even if the conference, like if they're turning it into an additional revenue stream, that may not be good. Like, okay, I'm going to rent out all the nearby venues so that I can control the side events. It, just pass along the cost. If you paid 20 grand for this venue, don't upcharge it to someone wanting to hold a side event and make that another revenue stream. And I think everybody can win. But yeah, it is a vicious cycle. You're right, because you're selling less tickets, you got to sell more sponsorships, and that's where the pressure is on those folks that are on the sales teams of the
Exactly.
conferences, and it's too much. And yeah, these some of the conferences, I mean, I've seen them, like the cost to maybe sponsor or get a booth. I've held conferences before, and I know what some of those costs can be. Sometimes it's just it's way too much, and it's they kind of exaggerate what's going to be
Oh yeah.
there. You get to the conference, and I've heard sponsors like, we paid 25 grand for this, like we've got no traffic, nobody's coming by.
And I mean,
So that's
yeah,
excuse
no,
me.
it's so true. And I think one of the trickiest things with events is is ROI, right? So for every company I've ever worked for, there's always this question about
Yeah,
how are you going to track the return on your investment for this particular event, because it's a tough one, because
yeah,
you've
it's
got
hard.
certain metrics that are tangible, like maybe you see an uptick in your social media engagement, maybe you obviously meet partners and you get deal flow from these events, but very often it's much later in time. You know, the deal doesn't get done until 6 months later,
Hmm.
and you're thinking, where did I meet this person? And you met them at an event, and so
Yeah.
that's fantastic ROI, but it's really difficult to track. And so, as I say, every company I worked for has
Oh
always
yeah.
been like, how can we guarantee that it's worthwhile for us? And I think as well, there's kind of a sweet spot with events. As you can tell, I love talking about events, actually. I have a lot of
Yeah.
opinions on events. But the thing is, I think some of them get so big that you really diluting the message, and it becomes, I don't know, almost like a contest, like who's got the biggest budget, who can throw the biggest party, and it's nothing to do with sort of, the
Right.
ethos behind why we're all here in this industry. And so I do have this kind of preference for semi smaller conferences. There's a great conference in
Hmm.
Paris, by the way, called Proof of Talk, where they really have endeavored to
Oh
keep the
yeah.
focus on the content. So they won't, there's no pay to play necessarily. Like they vet every speaker. It's mostly C suite, and so you go for the talks. And I just find, and there's very few side
Yeah.
events, if any, so they really discourage it. And so I think that, and you're dealing with a couple thousand people rather than, I mean, I don't know the exact number of token, but Dubai and Singapore are just wild. Like it's so many people, and
Yeah.
like you said, you have tons of people coming into the city who aren't even attending the conference; they're just there for the side events, which is also fair because I've done that too. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting to watch the evolution of it over time as more and more people come on board, and also to see the difference at events between your bull and your bear runs. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and definitely, I agree with you. Sometimes the smaller conferences have been the better engagements, the better quality of people that you run into, and maybe it's that their costs aren't so extravagant that everybody that is coming in, even though it's not as many people as those large conferences, they're all there for that main event, and there may be a handful of side events. I think back, some of the I think ones that stick out in my head was Istanbul Blockchain Week.
yes.
That one's always been a good one. And then outside of that, there's one that was kind of off of my radar until I got asked to speak a few years ago, and it's Serbia, ETH Belgrade, and
I've
Serbia
heard really
Blockchain
good
Week.
that I haven't
And
been, but I've heard really good things as well. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and so and that's kind of the elements you were just talking about. That's what it has. It's smaller, it's more intimate, but also at the same time, like the side event list, maybe 10 to 12 side events, right? That are not trying to compete with the main conference. It's kind of a complement instead of a competition, and I think that's what has to happen. Whether who's going to lead that charge, or we just keep seeing the cannibalization, like you talk about, where it's they keep raising the prices because they're selling less tickets because people are coming in town and not even going to the main event. But I've seen some conferences lately that have gotten really aggressive towards the end, like as you get closer, where they're doing like ticket giveaways or all these things. It's they realize that the sponsors are not going to be happy if you don't get them more foot traffic in front of them, and so that's when they start making deals on
And if you
tickets. And
think as well, like
it's
the person who benefits the most, I mean, everybody benefits from conferences, in my opinion, but the sort of demographic that benefits the most usually is founders. And if you think, many founders don't have, a ton of money, and so it's so important for them to be
right.
at these events, to especially if they're raising. But it's like, how are they going to get in the room? And so I find that
Yeah,
very that cost prohibitive. And to me, it's quite anti Web3. Like if you think about, we want accessibility
Yeah.
and we want there to be it for everyone. We want this mass adoption to happen, but then we have these
Yeah.
events that no one can afford to go to. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you say that. So in 2021, so you mentioned like London opened back up in 2022, right, with COVID, and that was the case for most of the world. But I was in Miami, and we were holding conferences in 2021. And so we did our first conference April of 2021, which was unique. We were able to get so many people outside of crypto that would normally not come because nobody had
yeah,
anything going on. Like we actually got Rick Ross to open the event for us. And so it was just one of those crazy things I could never pull off again because the world was just
yeah,
bored. And a lot of projects we were talking to that I wanted there, they were fairly new. They didn't have a lot of cash flow. And so I took tokens for a lot of the booths, and some of my business partners thought that was crazy. But at the end of that conference, we were at a net loss of about 30 grand, right? And because we rented the Intercontinental, like we had a lot, like, but the whole point was that was kind of expected because we were going to build it into an event brand. It took us 3 events to realize that we're not event people in terms of holding them. Like if I'd have known you back then, I would have looped you in to help with that. But at the same time, 6 months later, this was later on in 2021, like we were in the green. We weren't in the red anymore for that first conference because of the tokens I had
yeah.
taken. And one of the best ones was like it was a $20,000 pre ICO deal. They hadn't even launched their token yet, and eventually I think we cashed that out right around 104K.
Nice. That
Because
could have gone quite the
yeah,
other
yeah.
way.
So right. So I called the partners and I was like, hey, look, yeah, there was one other one that kind of went the opposite way. But I said, hey, look, remember, you know how we lost money in that first conference? Well, we're in the green now because we got this. And it was a token on Cardano. And so I liquidated over to Cardano and then converted that to dollars. And I asked everybody, I said, what do y'all want to do? Because there's a little bit extra in here. Like, do y'all want to just keep it in a pool and do something with it, or everybody get their own cut? And we decided everybody get their own cut. It's funny enough, my suggestion at the time, just for a little bit of another interesting fact of the story was that was at the time that Terra Luna was pretty big, and I was like, do we just put this in the UST and get the 20% APR on it, or do we just take our distributions and do whatever? And so luckily we decided on to take our own distributions and not put it in the Terra Luna because not too long after that was the crash of that.
Nice. Yeah, that would have been real bad. Good choice, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I'm curious to see too how the conference changes. A lot of people want to come and learn too, and I think that's a barrier. If you have even a $500 or $1,000 ticket, now obviously you're going to have those tiers. You've done events. Like if you're going to sell a ticket, you got different tiers where you can create a VIP experience, a better experience. But there needs to be an entry barrier. I just had a call recently with one of the guys I know from CoinDesk. He's one of the managing directors, and I was like, look. I was like, there should be some education there. We're kind of talking about what we could do, but they tried it years ago, and obviously back then it was a different. It was probably when there wasn't a lot of interest in it, but I think now, I said even if they don't get access to the main conference, they come for an education track, or they have the option to where if they attend the education track, they can upgrade to a bigger ticket,
Exactly.
for a discounted
Yeah,
price.
which makes total sense. And I think it's one of the reasons that Crypto Mondays London, like we intentionally partner with a lot of these big conferences because they will give us free tickets sometimes and they will give us a discount. And the whole idea behind that
Yeah,
was to be able to pass that on to the community so that some of these, especially like younger students and stuff like that, I mean, they don't have
absolutely.
$1,300 to
Yeah,
come to a conference. Crazy.
right.
So it was in order to pass that access on to the community. Like, whether it's a discount or free tickets, we'll do a raffle, so that, and it's good for the conferences as
Yeah,
well because you don't want an echo chamber of the same people over and over. You want to branch out and you
absolutely.
want to capture those newbies. Like it's really important and it's very valuable as well for everyone who's sponsoring, for everyone trying to do business. Like you want access to those people. So I think it's mutually beneficial on both sides. So I think things like that are really important. And I love that you brought up having an education track because I think same thing, even if they offered, like you said, a separate ticket, because I know a lot of times they'll do
Mhm.
like pitch competitions, like Startup Village, and the ticketing for that particular section will be cheaper and different. And I think that's great.
Right.
That's a great initiative. I do think there's more
Yeah.
that can be done for like the overall cost of tickets because it's just insane. But as I say, as an event person, I completely understand your overheads. And as time goes on, everything gets more expensive. I know in London, venue prices have increased dramatically. So even for us to keep
Yeah.
doing our events, like we've had to raise prices for our sponsors, all because the sole idea is to keep it free for people to come to. So, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it's a tricky one with the conferences. I think, and they're such an important part of our industry. I think more than more than anything I've done previously. The conferences for us, I think, are everything. You do new business, you network. I mean, it's you learn. It's and in an industry that's changing so fast all the time. It's really important, I think, to platform people who can talk about their roadmaps, their milestones, things that are going on, and so you can get this more frequent update for the industry. And I think
Yeah.
that's really paramount as well.
Yep. Yep. Definitely. So a lot of good stuff talked about here. I mean, I guess the call to action for anybody that's listening, other than to learn more about the space, is to get plugged into events, whether it's a large event or a local event like a meetup group,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the other thing I would say about community meetups that's really important is I mean, at least ours is, and a lot of the Crypto Mondays are neutral. They're very neutral. So we're not, beholden to any one protocol chain, anything like that. And I think that's super important too. Like you have these vast communities that are brilliant. I mean, look at Solana's done with Super Team. It's incredible. I know ICP is working really hard on their different hubs at the moment. Polkadot does a lot
Yeah.
of that too. Polygon has a huge ecosystem. I feel like that is super important. But obviously, all of those meetups and events, they have an agenda. They want you to use their product. That's fair, that's business. But I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important to have these sort of neutral spaces as well, where no one's trying to shill you anything.
Yeah.
No one's trying to get you to take your money to get you to do anything. It literally exists for you to
Yeah.
learn and to network. And so I think spaces like that are going to become more important as the industry expands and grows. So I think maybe you start a Crypto Mondays in Louisiana, but I just think, and
Yeah.
there are loads of them. Like Crypto Mondays, obviously not the only one. Off Chain is another big decentralized organization that does a lot of events. I know there's like Blockchain and
Mm-hmm.
Beers. That's very much South African, but there's a lot of those as well. So
Oh,
just really, really important. So I always sort of
oh,
encourage people like go and see what's local in your community. Go and see what's going on because I think sort of supporting local is important and extends beyond just and wanting to have security in your own city, but also starting there and then branching outwards. So I always encourage people to do that.
yeah. Nice, nice. Funny you mentioned blockchains and beer. I think it was 2017 or 2018. I started a meetup in my hometown. It was Bitcoin and beer, and it was really just me and the same four guys every week, just drinking beer, talking about Bitcoin. And
Well,
I wasn't consistent.
especially back then, they're probably like, who do I talk
Yeah,
to?
right. Yeah, and so that kind of fizzled out after a while. But I also realized like we live in a town, about 30 miles from New Orleans. So a lot of what I do when I say like I was at a Bitcoin meetup last night, it's in New Orleans, right? We've been fostering that community out there, but I think we're getting to a point. I live in a very much oil field and commercial fishing
Mhm.
community, so haven't really caught on to Bitcoin yet, but always there to drive
Well,
it.
that's why you were
So,
there.
but I think the biggest thing, I think if I consistently like think looking back, if I would have stuck with that, then that would have definitely probably turned into much more than what it was, where we could have, maybe consistently pulled in 20, 30 people if we'd have kept it up
Yeah,
consistent.
I imagine it would have grown loads. But the thing is, I mean, and you can speak to this, I'm sure, gathering a few people for beers is great and fun and low lift. But as it starts to scale,
Yeah.
it becomes a beast. I sort of say like it's
Yeah.
become almost unwieldy. Like we 14,000 members is a lot, and I always say like communities are
Yeah.
messy, glorious things, and you can't try and control them too much because it will backfire. So you just have to let it
Right.
do its thing, But I think it
True.
speaks to the appetite that people have to learn and to understand. I mean, look, technology is changing at a rapid pace, not just in our industry, like Web3, but everywhere. And if you look at the AI impact now, even I said this to my dad the other day. I'm like, if you Google something on your phone, what's the first thing that pops up? It's the AI response. So whether
AI.
you even like it or not,
Yeah.
it's here. And so the more that we can understand it and the
Yeah.
ethics of it, the better it is for everybody because it's such a useful tool. I don't think people need to be afraid of it, but it's the
Hmm.
same with Web3. Like, you don't need to be afraid of any of this. People think like you're coming for the banks. Like, yeah, we kind of are, but
Yeah.
actually now, like, mass with the
Yeah.
mass adoption, thing, conversation all
Yeah.
the time, you've got loads of banks that are in institutions that are now entrenched in the
Yeah.
industry. And so I think, look, it's
Yeah.
happening, it's coming. There's nothing you can do to stop
Yeah.
it. So the best thing you can do is arm yourself with knowledge.
Absolutely. So many great talking points here, Kaitlin. I hate to wrap up, but we're at the point where it's time to wrap up. So before we do, can you tell everybody where they can find out more to follow you, to follow Crypto Mondays London? Please
Yeah,
share that
so we're
info.
on X. I think it's Crypto Mondays LDN is the one on X. I'm just my name, so Kaitlin Argo on X. We have a Luma calendar you can subscribe to. If you Google Crypto Mondays, you can find a city near you. Hopefully, probably there's loads of them. So take a look. There's a website that has a map, and it's like an interactive map, so you can see where you're at. Um, yeah, we're on LinkedIn. It's just a quick Google. We're everywhere. So, and I love connecting with
Nice.
people. So I always say, like, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for what you need. If you need help, if you want to start a Crypto Mondays in your city, by all means, find us
Right.
and we will
Yeah,
help you.
definitely. So, Kaitlin, it's been a pleasure having you on today. Thanks again for joining us. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll catch you again on the next episode. Take care, everyone.